I wanted to take a moment to talk about the word gospel. The Gospel of Mark, the Gospel of John, we say. The gospel, or the word gospel in the original Greek New Testament, is euangelion. Euangelion. Eu means good, and angelion means message. Good message or good news. The English word gospel comes from Old English, God spell, which means good news. And so I want to think about that concept for a moment. Jesus says to go out and preach the good news. He tells this to his disciples. And Jesus came to spread the good news. When we think of it this way, we want to think to ourselves, are we trying to share, or are we sharing good news, or are we sharing bad news? If you notice, Jesus never guilted. He never shamed. He never judged. He says time and again, I didn't come to judge you. For example, he says in John 3:16, we all know, for God so loved the world, he gave his only Son, so that those who believe in him should not die but have everlasting life. But in John 3:17, the lesser known verse, it says, for the Lord sent his Son not to judge the world, but to save the world. In John 12:47 it says, if anyone hears my words but does not keep them, I do not judge that person. For I did not come to judge the world, but to save or heal the world. And so it sort of bothers me when I see people on the pulpit who are condemning, putting down, judging, and really not sharing what one would consider good news. For example, if you take someone who's a drug addict, is it going to help them to let them know how miserable they are and tell them that they are worthless? Think about a drug addict. Would you be comfortable telling a drug addict, you're so vile, not only your own mother and father would love you, not even them? What a heavy burden to feel so unloved and judged. Would you be willing to change? Maybe it would make the person feel bad, but would it cause lasting change? You see, if Jesus believed he could get lasting change from us by guilting us or shaming us, he could do that. But he specifically chose not to do this. Now let's go a step further. If we say to the drug addict, you're a drug addict, not only your own parents wouldn't love you, but not even God would love you. What a heavy burden. What a burden so heavy no one should be given that burden to bear. Is that good news? Hey, you're worthless. Hey, you're condemned. Hey, you're lost. Is this good news? Is this the gospel? Or is the good news that you are loved? That no matter what you do, no matter what your mistakes, no matter what your bad habit, God loves you. His Son loves you. No matter what, he forgives you. And even when you turn away and you're not seeking God, God is waiting for you. Because God will never turn his back on anyone. God loves infinitely, and God loves his children. Period. Isn't that good news? Isn't the good news that no matter how guilty we feel, no matter how judged we feel, no matter how condemned we feel, there's nothing we could do to take away God's love? That is the good news. Not that we are worthless, but that we are precious. Not that we are condemned, but that we are being offered forgiveness. I mentioned earlier that it's interesting when someone's telling you you need to change because something's not good for you, it's not beneficial, or it's harmful. It feels very judgmental. So, for example, telling somebody, hey, being a drug addict is not good for your health. It could be that subconsciously we know that certain things we do are not good. And so we feel guilty and we feel that the person's judging us when they're trying to help us. And this could be why Jesus says over and over again, I didn't come to judge you, I came to help you. Hey, I'm not here judging you. I'm just telling you that living this way is going to cause more harm and hurt to yourself than good. And I think perhaps the opposite is true. On the one hand, we feel judged when others are trying to give us good advice, but I think sometimes when we're giving our advice, our opinion, our point of view, our analysis, or question someone, we're judging them without realizing it. And if the person isn't ready to hear it or isn't open to us, maybe it's not our job to point out the ways they can do better. Maybe we just sit back and love them and offer them our love and friendship and goodness and wait for them to seek out. People who are rejecting or not ready to hear your message, I don't think it's proper to bully them, to condemn them, to rub their faces in their sins, because we are told and reminded that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Paul says in Timothy, God came to save all the worthless sinners. And you can hear that tone nowadays. You worthless sinners. But Paul finishes it by saying, of which I am the worst. So if St. Paul is a sinner and one of the worst, and if someone like St. Paul, who murdered Christians, could be forgiven, the good news is that we are all forgiven and we are all loved no matter what. God's love is not conditional on whether we behave good or behave well or behave badly. Think of a loving mother and father. They want what's good for you. They try to guide and instruct you. Ultimately, it's your life. But most loving mothers and fathers will love you unconditionally. Perhaps it will break their heart if you do things that are harmful or hurtful to yourself or others, if you're addicted to something or abusing yourself, or if you even murder somebody. They would be sad, confused, regretful, but they would love you still unconditionally. So perhaps when we're sharing the good news, we have to stop and ask ourselves, are we sharing good news? Are we lifting people up? Are we comforting? Are we offering peace and love and communion and connection with people? Are we uplifting them like a smile is uplifting? You're even uplifting your actual mouth. You lift it up to smile. Or are we pushing people down? Are we cutting people off? Are we separating? Are we offering the opposite of love and the opposite of hope? Just something to consider. What else is good news? The good news is that your Father is God, that God in heaven is your Father, that your Creator and where you came from is a God who is the King of Kings and a Master of the universe. Sounds like a movie. Let's imagine a movie where a prince or princess grows up in a foreign land and they don't know their parents and they don't know who they are and they don't know where they came from. And they feel different and they feel out of place and they just feel something isn't right. And deep down they know there's something more to life, but they just can't explain it. Well, that's really what it is. You are sons and daughters of the living God. So imagine in that movie finding out that you were the prince or the princess of some kingdom, and that your father and mother's kingdom span all of the universe, and that your family is one of goodness and light and truth and love, one of strength, wisdom, peace, and love. Now, isn't that good news? Isn't finally coming back to understanding and remembering who you are and where you came from the good news? Isn't it good news to be called sons and daughters of the living God? Jesus quotes the Old Testament and says, "Are ye not gods?" Because we are children of God. And God is inside of us, in our heart, in our blood. And we know that God lies hidden in our heart, but also in the heart of every man. And so it's to understand that not only are you a child of God, but everyone in front of you, from your worst enemy to your neighbor, to your best friend, to your wife, they are all children of God. And they deserve the same love, respect, kindness, goodness, the same wonderful treatment that you deserve as well. 1 John 3:1 says, "Behold what manner of love the Father has given unto us, that we may be called the sons of God." Another translation, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called the children of God, and that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know Him." I'll read that again. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know Him. And I think the reverse is true. The reason we don't know ourselves is because we don't know Him. And the reason that we suffer and feel so lost and disconnected and as if something isn't right. And how our lives begin to change when we finally understand and believe this. When we remember who we are and we put our faith and trust in God. Verse 2 says, "Dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been made known. But we will know that when Christ appears, we shall be like Him, for we shall see Him as He is. All who have this hope in Him purify themselves just as He is pure." So perhaps we need to focus on the good news and remind people where they came from, not their flaws, but their goodness a little bit more.